First of all, thank you to those who supported, comforted, and stood me, and also to those who questioned, criticized, corrected, or dismissed me. Together, you have allowed me to see a much larger map, a map about victims, society, and the psychological climate of this era. Some people call me brave, others call me naive. Some urged me not to feel sad, others suggested that being deceived was a deserved consequence. What shocked me most was that the anger was not directed at the scandals, but at the victim. Instead of asking, why do people harm? Many ask, why do they trust? The victim, who should be protected, became the one placed under moral scrutiny. But this logic is not accidental. It belongs to a society that has lived in a low-trust environment for a long time. In such an environment, avoiding harm becomes a form of competence, while being harmed is treated as a personal failure. Over time, victims cease to be seen as victims. They become those who failed to manage risk. This is no longer about individual morality. It is a cultural defense mechanism. People are not necessarily cruel. They are afraid. They are afraid to acknowledge how pervasive deception has become. So they choose to believe, as long as I am not that careless, it will not happen to me. I have seen this pattern in history, not today, but in the late Qing dynasty. When foreign powers arrived, people did not direct their fury toward the invaders. Instead, they examined themselves. We are weak. We are unworthy. Shame did not travel outward. It folded inward. Long braids hung down their backs, silent and helpless, as if trying to rationalize the wounds inflicted upon them. It was a form of cultural self-reproach and a kind of collective psychological defense mechanism. In many moments across civilizations, when a society endures immense external pressure, emotions do not immediately explode outward. They first turn inward, searching for self-fault. This tendency to internalize blame, to rationalize injury, and to redirect shame toward the self rather than the assailant has echoed through literature and intellectual history. It is not a mere recounting of facts, but a cultural, psychological imagery, one that helps us understand why today the victim is often criticized while the perpetrator vanishes into abstraction, why harm becomes individualized and loss becomes moralized. Such mechanisms may help maintain social order in difficult times, yet they impose additional silence and humiliation upon victims. This leaves us at a cultural crossroads. A culture can move downward, shaming the victim and excusing the offender, or upward, by protecting the victim and holding the offender accountable. Which direction do we choose? And what kind of society do we want to inhabit? One in which victims must lower their heads, or one in which perpetrators can no longer roam freely. So, this time I choose to speak, not to define myself, not to win an argument, but to point to the structure that makes harm possible and silence reasonable. To those who have been deceived, humiliated, mocked, or doubted, I want to say, you are not the problem. The problem lies with those who harm and those who reinforce harm by demanding the victim remain silent. May we one day live in a place where scammers cannot thrive, where victims do not have to bow their heads, and where calmness does not require self-erasure to survive. May every person who has been harmed no longer bear the burden of shame alone, but stand up with dignity and continue life on their own terms. If you have gone through it too, do not be afraid to speak. Speaking is not weakness. It has always been the beginning of change. We are still learning, but we are no longer willing to remain silent.